Okay, we are recording. How you doing, Sam?
Doing well, sir. How are you?
Yeah, all right, mate. Sam, we
Nice.
always start this podcast with the intro question. So for track one, Sam, can you tell me the song that you regard as having the greatest ever intro, please?
Yeah. To me, that's Genesis by Justice.
I'll tell you what, right? No one's chose Justice yet, and
Yeah,
I haven't heard that for about 5 years. And I heard it this morning. I was like, "Fuck! Why has no one ever chose this? It is
great.
huge, right?"
It's too big, larger than life, man. And even when I sit and hear how detailed it is, but it, I'm always fascinated by when things come out. And I heard they did that album on GarageBand in 2007, and like sound design wise, that's absolutely crazy because there's so
Yeah.
much on. It's so loud, it's so bright, it's so futuristic. It's obviously the elements of the sounds are like it's kind of like a soundtrack almost, like to a crazy film of some
Yeah,
description.
huge.
Perfect intro to that album. Perfect intro in general.
And just and just what Justice done. It was like for me, like going back to '89 and seeing like what Oakenfold
Mm,
was doing with like fusing electronic music with indie music, and
yeah,
what Justice done just kind of kicked off that whole Kitsune Ed Banger thing where every indie band was having these kind of like Errol Alkan like amazing remixes, and it was like it just kind of pulled the whole Indian electronic sort of music scene together again and just threw out so many amazing. Because
yeah.
am I right? Tell me if I'm wrong. You may well know this, but the Justice versus Simeon track that We Are Your Friends.
Yes.
What I gather, if this is the truth, so rumor has it that Eddie Temple Morris was doing something on XFM at the time where you would send in your mashups, and
Oh, really?
someone sent that in as a mashup.
Really?
And then Justice
And
and Simeon were
it
like,
happened.
fuck, we got to do something with this. And then
Wow.
obviously the rest is history.
Yeah, because that's a classic, isn't it?
Mate,
Wow.
absolutely.
I would
Absolutely.
believe that happening. But to be fair, I don't know what the original track is for that.
Mm,
Like the original Justice track, I've never heard.
yeah.
To
Yeah.
that, I'm not sure. Like, do you know that? You know how it's a mashup? It would be two songs, but
Of
I've never heard
course.
that
Yeah.
just.
Independently. Yeah.
But other than that, it could highly be true. I don't know. It's had Timmy and Mobile Disco as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. That's crazy because they're part of that era as well. It's that indie
100%.
and like the Klaxons and all that stuff. That
Yeah.
was like
Yeah.
the coolest thing when I was about because that was 2007, so I would have been 10 and 12 and all that stuff. That was what I would see on like Channel 4 with the when it was all about music videos and all that stuff. That
Yeah.
was like the coolest thing to me. So
Love
yeah,
it. Love
yeah,
it. I want to talk about intros and speak to you with your musician's hat on. And when you're creating music, tell me a little bit about because the way that people are consuming music, and I'm focusing this more on what I see when I watch how my daughters consume music, and
yeah,
they'll go, "Yeah, yeah, I know that." Like, how do you know that? And I'm like, because it come out when I was like 17. And they're like, yeah, 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 it's on TikTok, and it's like, and Spotify, and the importance of Spotify playlists, and rather than traditionally in my era where it was like getting on the radio, you know, getting playlisted on the right stations and such.
yeah.
How much of these things of getting on Spotify playlists and having something that could potentially, you know, latch on TikTok, how much of that, if at all, enters into your creative process when
No,
you're
not in the slightest. Because the way these things work, and people, it's funny because you can almost tell when someone's trying to aim for that level of viral like aspects. But what I've noticed from it is there's no clean line of what it takes to get a viral track on these platforms. So usually it's something that's authentic and like it's the funniest instance I've thought of recently was the Hudson Mohawk thing with Seabat when that just blew up off of a meme pretty much. Like he made that what 11 years ago. So it
yeah,
was nothing to do with the app in general. It just had a certain place in society now. And I think that's just the same thing.
yeah,
Even one of my tracks, Assumptions, was it got picked up on TikTok a year later. and I never intended for it to be. I didn't even, by the time I'd made that song, TikTok wasn't around because I made it so much more before. I just think it's a general thing of, and it's interesting you said about, you're saying your daughters learn stuff which you've heard from ages ago, but they know it instantly. I think it's a grand, that opens up a conversation about the internet in general, how younger people are going to get so much smarter because they have so much more data. They just get like fast tracked into it and they just have it immediately. And that does impact intros, but more so it impacts intros in the sense of it being, you can't really have a grandiose, like long kind of thing as much because the attention span isn't as what it used to be for all of us. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, it is weird because when, you know, I've had musicians come in here and choose like these kind of almost like 10-minute intros for these, you know, huge kind of Pink Floyd or Doors tracks, and you just think, if you went into a record company today as a new artist and went, I've got this intro is fucking epic, it's like 12 minutes, they'd be like, yeah, well, mate,
no,
it's not going to happen.
It's not.
All right, Sam, I'm going to take you back now, and I'm going to ask you for track 2 to tell me the first song you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you, please.
Yeah, I took this question literally. It was "Dancing in the Moonlight" by Top Loader, and I just remember hearing that start. Also, it's intro based. I remember hearing those keys, but I'm talking about I think I was 4 when I heard that. When I remember hearing that. And it's just got this certain sadness almost to it. There's something it's not completely happy. It's probably, I think it's slightly detuned actually. I think the sound in the sample where I don't know, but something about that when I was a kid just grabbed me. And I think a lot of people share the same kind of appreciation for that song when they were younger and stuff. So
I've never considered that there is some, like, because the actual song itself is quite joyous, right?
Yeah, no, I'm actually mainly talking about it's funny because the second intro to the end of the comment, but
no, it's quite somber, isn't it?
Yeah. There's a certain side to it, and it's not. That's what grabbed me as a kid. It was like it's got a happy context, but it just the sound where it's like, I don't know.
and it's quite, and I guess for, you know, as a 4-year-old, it's quite nursery rhyme like as well, isn't it?
Yeah, lullaby-esque as well.
Yeah.
Way step beyond that, because it's a real song. But like, I remember that's a good point. It's almost like that could be like the transition from it, like going from that stuff to music in general. I mean, I'd heard a bunch of other songs, but there's something about that when you asked me that question, there was something about that song. I think that's the first track. I was like, oh wow.
Yeah.
I think it's to do with the key the song's in as well. I think it's in C minor.
Yeah.
And that's it's not the brightest key. It's close to being really bright, but it's not. It's kind of like, to me. So, yeah.
If you had to pinpoint the emotion you got hearing that, what would it be?
I don't know, man. That's a hard question. I think it reminds me of a feeling. I think I heard it at a bowling alley or something, but I don't know if I've been at a bowling alley before. It must have been like 5 or something, because I would have been in Stirling where I moved to after Edinburgh. I think maybe it was to do with the association of where I was that made it quite like because I was already I think it was a bowling alley, so it was like quite a high energy place for a kid to be in. Probably hearing that made it, I guess. I couldn't tell you, man. I actually couldn't tell you the exact emotion. Because now I'm thinking about it, it's obviously nostalgia, because I'm rewinding at that point. But at that time, I didn't even know what emotions were as well. So it's hard to know what I was feeling. But I just know that track stood out when I was younger, for sure.
But that's the thing that's good about that question, is the fact that you said you didn't really understand emotions and such. But it's that thing where you hear a record for the first time and it sounds different to everything you've heard before. All of a sudden, it's not just noises. It's like, this has done something else.
Yeah,
this has created a feeling. This is weird. Like, do you know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And that's what's interesting as well in terms of keys of songs, which I've always had an interest in, because almost every song you get fed as a youth is in C major. So like Happy Birthday, like A, B, C, D, E, even the alphabet, you know what I mean? Mary Had a Little Lamb. They're all in this one key. And the interesting thing about that being in C minor, it's like the minor equivalent. And I make all my music in minor. Like usually it's the root is minor. I'll use major chords, but I use like there's something about minor. That might be another subliminal thing where that song set me off in a minor kind of like trip. But hearing that, so hearing C major get turned into C minor, it's like it is like night and day because C major has got that brightness and C minor got like a darker tone to it. That could be a huge part of maybe hearing songs when I was younger and that C major happy. Like I hate C major because it's like that jolliness that's not really real. It's like a fake jolliness. It's almost spooky in some contexts. If you slow it down and like change the environment, it becomes a kind of like Reservoir Dogs thing. You have a happy thing and something really crazy's going on. It's put that in a dark context. But I think that goes into what you were saying, like transitioning from stuff where you know it's a little tune and it's like it serves its purpose, and then you have something which is outside of that, a song in its own right. So I think that's definitely a good point, and why that stuck out.
Sam, you mentioned moving from Edinburgh to Stirling. So where was growing up?
Stirling. So that's central Scotland. So it's just in between Glasgow and Edinburgh, a little bit above. Excuse me. I was there till I was 23, moved back to Edinburgh, and then lockdown hit, and now I'm in London. So I've been there for a huge amount of my life, most of my life.
Tell me about home at Stirling. Was it a musical household?
No. There was glimpses of music. For example, my dad handcrafts bagpipes. That was his trade. So he has a wood turning lathe.
I mean, that's as fucking Scottish as it gets, right?
Yeah. It's hilarious. And my mum used to be in a band, but I'm telling you, man, you know what people have there? Like, I'm sure that with your family, you'll have your like tastes are in the house with the music. Like, I had none of that. There was no music playing generally. Like, and it wasn't a bad thing. If anything, it gave me this open space to find my own tastes. And YouTube had just came about by the time I'd say when you're 8, you kind of gain consciousness where you're like, all right, the time has happened so much that I know I'm a real being at this point. And around the time is when YouTube came about. So there were so many adverts and so many, like, the king of adverts to me at the time, or like just placement of song, you know, Right Up. I was hearing them a lot, and I'd actually, no, this is a good one. I'd seen them on Top of the Pops, and they were sat in a car, and the guy had a synth, and it was like 2 girls in the back or something like that, and they were just playing it, and there was no vocals. I remember seeing that on Top of the Pops probably about when I was 6, and that really stuck out to me. I maybe should have said that instead of Top Loader, but that would be the first instance. Top Loader would have been the first instance, but when visually seeing the guys in Royks Up play the synth when everyone else was doing like bands and like miming and all the rest of it, that stood out like crazy to me.
That's surreal. Yeah. That's surreal, man, because at that age, surely your brain is going to be conditioned to the most glitzy, bright pop, hook-ridden, like stuff that's tailor-made for young ears, and you're going down a fucking rabbit hole with Royks Up. That's fucking mad.
But then there'd be like, I'm sure there was bank adverts. I have quite a good memory, man. This is the thing. I was very like, I was absorbing all this stuff. I think there was a bank advert that had So Easy on, and they just have very syncable music, right? And that in itself came into my subconscious. And through YouTube, I could go back. Like Melody AM, the album that all these are on, is one of my favorite albums ever. Because it's this kind of, it's not necessarily like an overload of information, but it's just stuff done really meticulously and really thought out and really well polished and just quite easily accessible. I think that's why that album did so well, with it being so heavily instrumental. It kind of doesn't alienate people. It just has this universal sound. But so that was an instance that really sparked I think that's where my electronic seed was planted, because I was like, why are these? I was more so just like, why are they not singing? So it wasn't like I was immediately like, oh, those guys are cool. I was more like, it came as a shock. And then obviously Daft Punk. I remember where I first heard Daft Punk and known it was Daft Punk. I was on this road. I know, I literally know exactly where I was. I was 8, and Annie Mac said it was around the world, and I heard it. I went straight home. Then I was also a massive Star Wars geek, so the transition from the robots and the droids from Star Wars into Daft Punk was like linear, like the exact same thing. So I just that's when I got really geeked on music, was when I heard about Daft Punk. And then I started sampling music. I used to, because I got so into Daft Punk, I used to look at all their samples from Discovery. And then my brother was making like happy hardcore, like chav music in the house. So maybe that would be an instance of what was playing in my house. But I hated it because it was just like noise, like doof, 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 way too loud and like abrasive. But he was using Acid Pro, which is like a waveform software, quite similar to Audacity kind of thing. And I would go on that and look for rare disco songs on YouTube and sample them when I was about 10 or 11 years old. So that's when the journey started in that sense. But I was like feeding myself, trying to find the rarest samples of like funk, disco, like fusion records, like George Duke and all that. Daft Punk samples George Duke. So I was on George Duke. Like that was my thing when I was really young. So I guess the space in not having music led me on this crazy journey, which was very specific to it being the time that I was born. Because it was, I literally 8 and 9 years old, bang, started Googling about all this stuff.
Oh, mate, Sam, you must have been a very intense young lad. That's pretty heavy at 9 years old. Crate digging for fucking rare disco samples.
I brought in Discovery as a CD when I was like year 7, primary 7. I must have been like 11. I remember playing it to my classmates thinking they're all going to love it, and they're like, "Oh, it's so repetitive, turn this shit off." Like, even the teacher was like, "Sam, this is too much." I was like,
well, that's fitting, because I'm going to ask you now for track 3 to tell me the song that reminds you of your time at school, please, Sam.
I chose high school for this one because there was so much like this one really reminds me of high school. It reminds me of like, even, like the in-betweeners and stuff like that. That was such a thing when I was at high school. So it's kind of like this memory is like meshed into one. And they always used to, and even like, I don't know why, I never really watched the in-betweeners that much, but it's just that I remember like looking at that, it gives me the exact same feeling of going to high school and how awkward it was and how interesting. Like I didn't like school at the time, but I look back on it, I think that was it was fine. It wasn't traumatic or anything like that. It definitely taught me that I didn't want to be academic, but yeah, Tudor Cinema Club for me was that was that kind of like, I don't even know if you know what Bebo is. Do you remember Bebo?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought that might have been a young thing. I wasn't sure, but no offense. But I'm talking about like high school folk. I didn't know that other people had that one. But yeah, people. I remember you'd go on people's page and it would automatically play someone from YouTube, and 9 times out of 10 it was Tudor Cinema Club.
Yeah,
just a moment in time for me, like that. That's actually post to me of the stuff we were talking about with Justice. That was when they still had the indie elements. I think one of the guys for Cassius. I'm pretty sure he produced the song I chose.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's part of quite a lot of that, because you'll notice a lot of the songs are actually drum machines, and that give it a kind of like. I love drum machines, especially because it's reminiscent of like 80s stuff. So it kind of gives just band music a little bit of an edge, just a tiny push towards it not being just like, like a traditional indie band. But yeah, I love this song that I chose. This Is the Life, Tudor Cinema Club.
So you said that you wasn't that academic at school. Like, did you know what you wanted to be when you were at school?
I was bang in the middle. So I wasn't bad enough to be looked after, but wasn't good enough to be like given praise. So I was bang in the middle. It's gradually started to decrease down. But when I came into school, I was kind of like, you could almost ignore. It's so interesting that it's kind of like that at school. It's almost like a family dynamic. I was like the middle child of probably like 20, but like bang in the middle. You'd definitely forget that. But through that, I ended up becoming like a class clown type because I was just so bored. And it wasn't. I I had a run of bad teachers, to be fair. Not bad people, but just they couldn't teach for shit. And I had struggle writing kind of thing. I had horrific handwriting, and half my classes when I got into like later on in school was just like, write this down. And it was more like a speed lesson how to write really quick. So all my notes would be like half written and all that stuff. And as I was getting gradually worse, I remember my friends were like kind of like, oh, I'm kind of worried, Sam, like what's going on? But I was making really weird electronic music at the time, which I knew, I didn't know I was going to get a career off of it, but I knew it was like I was skipping, and actually no, I never did homework, but if I was to do homework, I'd be skipping it to do all this music stuff at home. So when that was happening, I just looked around, and it was really, I also thank my parents for letting me leave, but what I seen was that all my friends are putting themselves in almost like a suffering position to get what they want. And there's nothing there academically that I want to suffer for. So it was really like a psychological thing of, I'm not putting myself in a stressful position to do just because they've told me I need grades to get into university. I didn't want to go to university. I knew that. I was never wanting to go down that route.
What did you want to do?
Music permanently. It was always that. I've got photos of me, like I drew like pictures of me in front as a band member, like the front guy in a band member playing the bass, just to be weird, because I love the bass. There's a single, I'll tell you why I love the bass, you'll know what one it is. But there's drawings of that I did it myself when I was like 8. So from there, like almost, I knew I wanted to do music, and I knew it wasn't the conventional stuff. Because the interesting thing as well, there was academic music people next to me, which also got more attention than me. So it was an interesting time. It was like, it felt like, I think like a lot of people, especially in the creative field, they see school as it's more like a system rather than it's not like I won't get into that, but you know what I mean. It doesn't.
I've done 450 of these podcasts now, and I would say over 400 people on here that and they're all creatives. They've all pretty much said exactly what you was probably going to say then, like that it was a system and it did not compute with what they wanted to be or who they were, and it was just a means to an end to get out and then to do the things that they wanted to do.
I can't remember. I heard someone say that the school system hasn't changed in like 150 years. When you think about it, it's like the bell, the row of seats, the teacher, and then this and that. Like, think about how much everything has changed around school since then. So that's another point. It's like outdated, and it gives this kind of mechanical cog mentality, which I could never. I was too distracted for stuff like that.
Tell me a little bit about you know, you say you was, you know, at that point you discovered like Daft Punk and Rexop and all of these bands that have come from these crazy places around the world. Did it seem a possibility that a lad from Stirling could make a career in music?
Do you know what's crazy, man? I never really thought about where I was, because it was so internet based. And everything I was getting fed was coming from one source, which was the internet. And that has no bounds. It's all over the world. I never really sat down and went, oh, I'm from Stirling. There's no way I could do this.
Yeah.
Because it actually, probably a huge part of that was because I was listening to music all over the world. So I never seen it as a thing where like location had a certain, you know, like a certain place. I didn't think, oh, I had to move to London to make it in the industry.
Yeah.
I probably would have 10 years before if I had just got into music without the internet and I was just like actually jamming out. But that, again, just because of what time in life I got into it and like what was happening with the internet, I never really had that thought.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me the first song you remember buying from a record shop.
Feel Good Inc. Gorillas.
See, this is the one that's meant to be like embarrassing, and you've actually got a fucking stone cold killer single there, mate.
Yeah, and also my album, my first ever album I bought was Chemical Brothers.
Oh, fuck off! That's just too cool, man. Come on.
I came in swinging, man. I'm not gonna lie. There was also I can't take credit for that. There was amazing music that was coming out then.
It was a beautiful time for electronic music, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, like it was literally pop almost. I heard Push the Button, the Galvanized. I was like, whoa, because I heard that on the radio.
Yeah.
Like this was stuff that was actually getting played, and like Feel Good Inc. I remember listening to Demon Days on, you know, in Sainsbury's they used to have the CD player.
Yeah.
And you had headphones in. I used to listen to that whenever my mum would go shopping around to sing. I just had my headphones in, and she'd go and do her shop. But I think they usually change the CDs. But I'm certain the guy didn't change the CD because he knew I kept coming in and listening whilst my mum was shopping. So yeah, Gorillaz is a huge, like, that's why I drew myself with the bass guitar in the front with a Feel Good Night. And the CD I got is weird because it was like, I think it was a DVD single. So like I'd put it in my laptop. I was also very blessed to have a laptop at this time. And like things like that, like my friends didn't necessarily have good computers. So I had that Sony Vaio 32 gigabyte hard drive and all that stuff. It was absolutely like top of the range. But I put it in and you'd get the music video, so I could see him playing the bass, and I wanted the bass almost immediately after that. I didn't get a bass until I can't remember. I do always wonder what would have happened if I got that bass at that time, but I'm glad with the way things went. And I think because I wasn't so instrument based, I was fixated on the computer, and that's what really served me well. Because I had that sponge youth like brain attacking something that is like brand new, rather than coming at like 20 or something, and it's just you're set in your ways anyway. It's like I kind of grew up with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Feel Good Inc. Still one of my favorite songs ever.
Yeah, I saw Gorillaz. It was my first gig after lockdown, and it was at the O2. And my pal's a nurse, and she was like, "Do you want to come with us? Like they're doing a free gig for nurses." And
No way.
I actually saw the Gorillaz' first ever gig. It was at the Scala in King's Cross, and
no chance.
And it was like I couldn't. Like I was a huge Blur fan. You know, they're Essex boys, so we love them here. And it was like I've seen Blur so many times. It was like, right, what am I going to see at this first gig? No one knew. And if I remember rightly, I think the rhythm section was Tina and Chris from Talking Heads.
Oh,
and
really?
yeah, and the band, it was a fucking ridiculous band. And obviously Damon up front. And I thought, what are we going to see? Like, and obviously Scala's only a pretty small venue.
Yeah.
And there was just this white sheet, and all you could see was like these silhouettes. And it was just really, really fucking surreal, but sonically it sounded unreal. And then whatever, 15, 16, 17, maybe 20 years later, seeing them like last year coming out of lockdown at the O2 with like fucking De La Soul and Lil Sims, everybody on stage. It was like a carnival, and the visuals, obviously what Jamie Hewitt does is unreal. And just the whole thing, it was just like one of the greatest things I'd ever seen. Like as a party, it looked so mental, and it was like, and I think Damon doesn't get the credit he deserves for Gorillaz, because I think it's really forward thinking what he's doing now. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's no genre attached to the Gorillaz.
There's actually no artist like Gorillaz either. Not even a cartoon element. It's just the sound is so unique. But so the fact that the biggest success story for me is they did Demon Days, which was like a classic in my eyes, and then they kind of amped it up for Plastic Beach. And like, how do you do that after that? Like that was like that really solidified who they were to me. I think Plastic Beach potentially is the better album, but the sonics from Demon Days will never leave me because they're so ingrained in my childhood. But like things like Dirty Harry and that, you just go back to it and listen to it, and you're like, it's just the rhythm and the sounds. It's timeless. It's really, really, really impressive music. And I just seen them at All Points East very recently, and I can definitely say it's the best show I've ever seen. Yeah. In terms of like, I'm never usually like blown away at a show, just because I've been to a bunch of festivals in my time and just kind of seen a lot of acts, which I love musically, but just never really been like, oh wow, this is crazy. But they put on like, as you said, like a carnival. It's not just like a music show. It's kind of like this full, it's like operatic almost. It's like very formative and really, and all the visuals in the back. I was like, I've seen all these things. Like a lot of the ones like when I was like really young. I was like, I've seen this on YouTube, this and that. It's just like that's another thing as well. I knew it was my favorite show, because I'd seen. No, after the show, I went straight back to the discography and just listened to all the stuff again. And I've never had that impact from a show before.
Yeah.
They've done their thing. I've seen all the songs. I'm well fed. But they have so much back catalogue where they didn't get to play other songs, but they still chose like the right songs to play. So I was very impressed by that. And you're right, it doesn't get enough credit at all. I think.
I think in years to come, people will look back and talk about Damon Albarn the way that people talk about David Bowie. Like constantly reinventing himself in whether it's Marley music, whether it's Blur, whether it's Gorillaz, just constantly just creating this fucking mad stuff. Just really, really good with real kind of solid pop sensibilities as well. It's like, I think he's a real maverick.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Tell me the song that soundtracked your years in Clubland. You're still in the middle of it. You're still a young one.
No, I chose one. That's why I chose this one. Bloomin' Free by Lone. This song drives me crazy. There's not everything about it is like pointing towards it having this 4 in the 4, but it doesn't come in, and it just keeps you teased for about 8-minute song, and the chords are so full, so bright, and then there's this like little chopped. It's like a gated vocal thing, and it's the most addictive sound I've ever heard in my life. People always ask me like, "Oh, what would the last song you'd want to hear? Like the Death Row Meal would be the Death Row song." I say that for 2 reasons. One, because of that vocal thing. The other thing is because it's 9 minutes long, so I'd have a long time. But that song, like if I really want to get in a euphoric, like happy mood, that's the song I'd just gravitate towards.
Nice, love it. Where's clubbing these days?
What's that, bro?
Where's clubbing these days? Now, you're based in London now, right?
Yeah, I just moved here. I don't really go out that much. I kind of end up going to casual parties that my friends throw rather than going out in clubs. Do you know what? I end up in Coco quite a lot, to be fair, because they've reinvented themselves. They're doing like loads of shows right now. I just did a show with Madlib last week in Coco
nice.
region when my mixtape dropped. So I played there, but I'm usually there because they get the best acts, and it's a fun. It's not a traditional club. I don't. Try to think. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I kind of struggle going to club nights because I've got the DJ curse where I'm just like, I feel like I'm on the job, but I can't actually it's like everything that the club is there for. I can't really detract myself from the musical aspect.
Sam, I've got a club and I've run it for 32 years, and it's really weird. I think once you've either DJ'd or run a club and seen behind the curtain, the magic is hard to kind of find now. And like, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. It's so tough, man. I had an interesting conversation with a friend about this. Like, basically, we were talking about why people go to the club and all that. And I basically told him I can't move the football aspect of it because I don't know if I'm going to the wrong clubs. I probably am. But it's so loose on what's going to grab me. Like sometimes I've been out on a night out. Usually it's something where I'm like completely not expecting it to be good, and then it just floors me. That's when it's like but how are you meant to aim for that? You end up going to stuff that's not good anyway. Yeah, I don't know how to explain it. Yeah, maybe it is a reflection of what clubs are like right now. But for me, I just don't get that kind of. And it is to do with the control element. I'm a control freak, so I'd probably prefer to be DJ. That sounds not being weird. But
no, mate, I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like I think I'd rather be in that room up playing the songs rather than be in the room listening to the songs that I don't really want to hear particularly.
Absolutely.
The radio instead of your Spotify playlist. That'd be good. Like, it's risky. There's a lot more risk just listening to a radio station than your actual taste. That might be selfish, but that's kind of where I'm at with it.
All right, I'm going to take you home for track 6, Sam. Tell me a favourite song from an artist from your home county.
I had to choose Hudson Mohawk. He's my favorite artist from where I'm from. I'm claiming Glasgow right now because there's no artist from Stirling. But Scotland in general is small enough. I chose Rising Five because that was a song that was in my head when I thought of him. That's the one that I was like just heard when I immediately said it. So Rising Five, yeah, that's a great track. That album got me thinking about locations of places because there's the stuff that he was doing was it was so heavily influenced by the stuff my brother was doing, but in such a completely different rhythmic style. But sonically, there was these kind of rave sounds. Oh, sorry, man. Someone's calling me. Yeah, they just had a very Scottish feel to it, very like overload of euphoric, like high frequency. I don't know how to exactly explain it, but you know, like it's almost like fairground music in a sense. Like Scottish music has that like dance. How 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 buzzed can we feel off something? Maybe because it's the weather and it's like grey all the time outside. We have beautiful scenery, but like when you're in the city, it's very industrial. It's for Glasgow, and even Edinburgh has a kind of like gothic tone. So I feel like the music palette almost like completely contrasts that, and it's usually something that's really like in your face, very bright, very euphoric. That's the word I'd use for it. But Hudson Mohawk did it in a broken beat, like almost with influence from early beat scene stuff like Flying Lotus and all that, and he just completely flipped it. And this was before I knew what trap was and all that stuff. So before that, I was getting into this sound, which he pioneered to me. Like him and Rusty, they've got a similar kind of dubstep was floating about, but they were doing it in a kind of strictly hip hop polyrhythmic. Everything was so intelligent in that album, especially Butter. And I knew he was using FL Studio, and I knew he was using. He told me recently that he was using it on a Windows XP like old computer. And these drums, man, they're all programmed. And the fact they're all programmed, and the fact he was doing it, it must have been before 2009. Again, I have a fixation on when people make stuff and how it can just continue to sound brand new. No one understood that record when it came out. I think people don't get it still, but something about it to me, because I was at that hyperactive teenage years. I was from Scotland and I was getting into hip hop via electronic music. It was like bang. That's what set it off for me, and that's what really made me want to make more experimental stuff as well. Because it took me away from French house, which is all about kind of capturing a moment and capitalizing on that one moment. This stuff was like the opposite, like creating a world and breaking it in front of you, kind of thing. Yeah. Like totally the opposite of what I was used to. So I'm very thankful to have heard all that stuff and have that in the back of my back pocket, because it means I can get weird, but also get quite centered into a certain like sound. But yeah, Hudson Mohawk, man, it's crazy. One of my favorites.
And for your last track, you can be tastemaker, or as the kids call it, influencer. Tell me a song that you think many people may not know that you would like them to hear, please, mate.
It's called Body and Soul, and it's the 4-minute version that I specified in 4-minute 58. There's two versions because it's an old jazz album, but it's by Coleman Hawkins. I think I heard this on a blog, but I could not tell you exactly how I found this stuff. It's just like a slow jazz. I think he's a saxophone player. And all the sounds, the movement of the track is so, I don't know if it's a jazz standard that he's putting a spin on, or that he wrote that song. But it's like the drums are so low in the mix. It's just like, it's almost soundtrack based, but it goes in so many different colors and different directions. And there's no reason that anyone's going to hear it, because it's not going to be played on like, even the fact of like, I had to specify which one it is.
Yeah.
Because there's another one which is more famous, but it's a similar, you know, the jazz guys, they always do that. They have a certain riff and then they name the same song about 8 times. But this song really stuck with me. I remember hearing it. I used to listen to the full album, but this one from the album is really beautiful, and I want people to hear it because I can almost guarantee there's not going to be another instance where you're going to get someone telling you to listen to that song. And even in that, in general, I love things like that because it's like a little secret that you can share with people. That's why I love sampling, because I ultimately probably found that because I was on a sample one. But this one's definitely, it's just gonna stick with me forever. I listened to it again after choosing it. I was like, this is so beautiful, and it just gives you it's so peaceful. If you ever need to relax and just sit back on a couch and do that, like you put that one on and just chill, do whatever you need to do. But that's definitely, yeah, it's gonna live with me forever, that track.
Well, Sam, what we do is we make it easy.
Chance to speak about it either, so I'm glad you asked me that question.
Well, we make it easy for people to go and discover it because we put together a little Spotify playlist to accompany the podcast with all of the tracks that you've chosen on, and obviously some of your music as well, Sam. So, Sam, moving forwards, what's happening for the rest of the year? What's happening with you, mate?
I'm finishing my album. I just dropped my mixtape, which was 15 tracks. Dropped it last Friday. So I've got tour dates I've just announced, which will be in February. So I've got one in Paris and one in London right now. There's more coming in Europe. But yeah, I'm juggling 2 albums at the minute. And the reason why the mixtape had the genreless, it was like 1 minute it's like house or trap or this, but the second last track is kind of slow 80s jam. Like it just goes all over the shop. But I treated it like a series, like a TV series, so like different episodes within the series. But the albums are going to be like films, so it's going to be very thematic. So essentially, my first album I wanted to be a funk album, or like a disco, reminiscent of what I was listening to, like with, and all the samples I was going to. I was heavily into Jamiroquai when I was growing up as well, and actually I got into them because of an advert of their greatest hits. And I just heard all these songs combined. I was like, whoa, these sound crazy. And then I got this. I heard all this stuff. I was like, wow. The TV, things like that really helped me because I wasn't hearing music when I was growing up, as you said. But yeah, back to now. One of them's going to be a funk album. The other one's going to be more experimental, like trappier. Kind of, I want to pay homage to the older stuff of the funk album, but still have some pushing, like some stuff that you wouldn't hear traditionally. And then the next album be this kind of looking forward, like futuristic sounds, something that's gonna like hopefully. That's why I love funk, because it withstands the test of time. You can listen to it at any point. If it sounds good, it's gonna stay there. But I want the next album to be more like pushing forward, so it makes more sense in future, and things like that. But yeah, just gonna keep making music, enjoy myself in London because I've only been here for 2 months, so.
Oh mate, there's lots to be had. There's lots of fun to be had there, mate.
There's too much to do.
Sam, if people want to keep up to speed with releases, tour dates, and such, where's the best place to follow you, mate?
I'm most active on Instagram. For Twitter's close second. It's just my name, Sam Gellaitry, and I've got a website with all my tickets and stuff if you ever want to come and see me. But yeah,
okay. Well, if it's cool with you, we'll tag you in everything when this comes out, so people can find you if they haven't done already.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you very much, and thanks for having me,
Sam. I've had an absolute ball today, mate. It's been really nice talking tunes with you, mate.
Likewise, and thank you so much.
Oh, mate, absolute pleasure. I'm going to press stop. Don't go anywhere.